Welcome, everybody. This is Debbie Mayberry with National Kitchen and Bath Association. You're here for our very first webinar of the year called Making More Sense of Social Media for Business with Jim Nowakowski, who's the president and owner of Interline Group, which is based in Chicago. And Jim, if you're there, we're ready to get started. Thank you.
Debbie, thank you so much. Hopefully everyone can hear me. And so glad to be with you. This is Jim Nowakowski, president of Interline Creative Group. I want to start out by saying I really appreciate it. Debbie, I looked at the attendance list. I think we have every state in the United States represented here. And I'm so delighted to be in front of you today with this very important topic, social media for business. The presentation is copyrighted, but as Debbie mentioned, it's going to be recorded. You're going to get a link, and if you would like, after this, you can just email me. I'll give you my email address. I can send you a PDF file as well, although the recording is much better. Debbie mentioned questions. We love to have your questions. You can type your questions in the chat box, and Debbie will share them with me at appropriate times. I want to make this as interactive as possible. This course was created because basically, social media has generated significant interest. Isn't that the truth? That's really putting it mildly these days. You can't watch television without somebody quoting a tweet. You know what I'm talking about. So what we wanted to do is we created this webinar a few years ago. We've updated it several times because the world of social media is changing so dramatically all the time. And one of the things you'll see here as we go through here is some of the example I'm going to give you on how to use social media as a listening device and how to create a social media strategy for your business, because business is very different than social media for personal use, as we're going to talk about. So we set some objectives for you. Participants, you'll learn about the definition of social media. I'm an ex-English teacher. I love words, but when you think about social media, it means so many different things already that I want to try to define what that term means and look at the various platforms, because I want to get one thing in front of you right now so that everybody understands. The most important marketing tool you have is your website, which fortunately or unfortunately is on the internet, which fortunately or unfortunately is tied into these social media platforms. And what we're going to talk about today is how your business, and there's a wide variety of people in the audience. I wish there was a magic bullet or a way to say, this is how you should use Twitter, this is how you should use LinkedIn, but there's not. However, there are definite ways you can all use these social medias for business, these platforms. So we're going to recommend guidelines. We're going to show you how to develop a plan. And we're going to use an example. I'm going to give you a real life example of how to do this with these platforms. I'm going to make a wild assumption now and say that everyone in this audience is on one or more of these platforms. Debbie, I think that's a safe bet, especially nowadays. But even if you're not, don't worry about it, because this course is going to show you you can't possibly be on all of them anyway. With that said, I'd like to start out with a story. The Jersey Boys was playing at the Paris and Vegas a few years ago when the KBIS was there. By the way, I'll be speaking at KBIS this year also. So we went to see it, and Travis Clow, the second guy from the left there, played Frankie Valli. This was an unbelievable performance, as most Vegas shows are. Afterwards, the next day, we went shopping. You know, I was standing out in one of the malls, and I decided to say, I wonder if Travis is on Twitter. Twitter is one of my favorite social media platforms, not just for business, but for other reasons, as I'll mention to you. So I looked for him, I found him, and I tweeted him. And within a minute, Travis responded to me and say, so glad. I said, Travis, great performance. My wife and I were in the audience, unbelievable. Really enjoyed it. You knocked it out of the park. He replied to me in less than a minute and say, thank you, Jim, for the audience. Really appreciate it for being there. Glad you liked the performance. Within 2 minutes, the producer weighed in and also said, thank you for coming, Jim. Please tell your friends. Da, 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 da. Within 5 minutes, the Arizona, Travis Clover fan club weighed in and say, Jim, this is great. Well, this is great. So for 5 minutes, I was standing in a mall in Las Vegas talking about the performance I saw the night before with the star of the show. So the question I have for you, ladies and gentlemen, because it was done over a social media platform called Twitter. How did you do that before social media platforms? How in the world could you do that? Would you write Travis a letter? Would you send him a telegram? Social media is really a blessing and a curse because what it does is it allows you to communicate with anybody in the world. And guess what the danger is? You can communicate to anyone in the world. Right. You can start a firefight on Twitter, as is evidenced by what goes on in the news these days. Anyway, let's define our terms. The beginning of wisdom, according to Socrates, is really the definition of terms. Aristotle, who was taught by Socrates, so what is social media? What are we talking about? If you look up the definitions, social media is a form of electronic communication, blah, 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 blah. That's great. I'm an English major, right? So I like to use the words as nouns, pronouns, adjectives, etc. So if you look at social media, the noun in that combination is media. And somebody in their infinite wisdom called social media, and it became a buzzword, and now it's a thing, social media. But what is it? It's really a way of communicating. It's a usable definition, but it's really media. And media can mean television, radio, the internet, newspapers. Social is just a way of saying it's society. But I ask you truthfully, what isn't really social? You know, we consume newspapers if you still read newspapers. I don't, but some people do. We consume things on the internet. We consume. Look at what Netflix has done and Amazon Prime has done to television. There used to be 3 stations and so on and so forth. But social media is not just the platform. I want you to think about this. When we get to Facebook, one of the things that happened is when Facebook was first invented, many of our clients, which were, businesses, they assumed that they could abandon their websites. This is true, and just go onto Facebook. And then he changed the algorithms of Facebook, and all of that hundreds of $1,000s of investment went down the tubes. That's why I say, and I will reiterate this throughout the presentation, your website is the most important marketing tool you have, but you have to use these platforms in conjunction with your website. This chart shows you the rise of social media. Now, I'm going to go back in time. I'm a little older than most of the people in the audience, and I remember when television was invented. When television wasn't invented, agency people got all excited. They started like, oh my God, this is great. We can put a box in everybody's homes and just broadcast commercials and sell stuff. They were just so delighted. This is the time, this is according to McKinsey, who's a big global researcher, right? This is the time it took, right, to reach 50 million people. 50 million people. It took radio almost 40 years, television 13, Twitter less than a year. Why? Because of the internet. It uses that internet platform and it develops audiences. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the challenge you face. Before the internet, before social media, it was very nice. You had a defined audience who read some newspapers or magazines, and everybody was nice little buckets. Today, it's anybody's game. It's anybody because everything changes constantly. This is a stock market picture. Look at how volatile the stock market is. Social media platforms are just like that. Facebook was invented in 2004, ladies and gentlemen, and it's over what? 2 billion people are on this platform now? And look at all the trouble they're facing with privacy. We're going to talk about that. So you can see that used to be oral tradition. It took centuries to get a piece of information from one person to another. Today, you hop on one of these platforms, you post something, and the next thing you know, it could go viral, right? And if you're saying, well, Jim, that's what I hope you tell us, how to make our posts and everything go viral. That's really not what you want. You couldn't, ladies and gentlemen, there's a thing in business that if you get too much business, you're going to lose business because you can't satisfy your customers. So be careful what you wish for. We're going to talk about that throughout this presentation. And ladies and gentlemen, since everything we do is social, what we're doing today, by the way, thank you so much for your hour of your time. This is, time is the currency. If you invest time, you're not going to get it back, right? It's gone. That's what we're talking about. And I'm so grateful for you to be in the audience. And I'm going to give it my best to help you through this social media dilemma, which, by the way, we all face. Just keep this in mind. There's senders, there's receivers, and then there's receivers and senders again. It goes up and back, and it's social. We're all about social. You cannot possibly keep up with the number of platforms there are in the world. You can't do it. So the first thing, a rule of social media is choose your platforms. We're going to talk about which ones in a minute. Because there's over 210 with 349 footnotes. All you have to do is go to Wikipedia and look at this. And I'm sure there's more than that now. You cannot possibly keep up. Here's the latest, TikTok. I'm sure, is there anyone in the audience, Debbie, I wonder, on TikTok? This just started growing, right? This is the latest thing. Look at their tagline. Make every second count. They want you to be posting videos, right? Make every second count. You don't have the time to do TikTok. You remember Snapchat? Oh my God, the Snapchat. This is the greatest thing since sliced bread. Well, guess what? These social medias are continually changing. They're changing. If you go to Alexa and you look at, the most visited websites, it's Google, it's Facebook, it's YouTube. Those are platforms. Those are platforms. But they're not. So when we think about social media in your business, what we want to do, yes, I see kids love it. They do love it. Of course they love it. But kids don't do, of course, kids buy through their parents. But what we're talking about here, ladies and gentlemen, are social media platforms to help grow your business. And you can go on Google and say, tell me the social media platforms to grow my business. And they'll give you a list. There's dozens of lists. Here's my list I chose. I want to review some of these as we look at these platforms for your business. You can't keep up. If you don't see something on here that you're using, please email me. When we're done with this, I'd be happy to review it. But these are the ones most people use when you're going after a business. And if you're going after a business that uses these platforms, you have to be aware. You have to be aware of them. Yes, Google Plus is in fact ending soon. In fact, Google is ending their whole dynamic of, they used to do these Google short links, if you understand that. The reason I'm reacting to that is I can see some of the chats you're doing, and I appreciate that so much. But I want you to remember this. It's not about you. Oh, Jim, I love Instagram. Oh, no, I can't be without it. I'm a designer. Absolutely. But is your customer on Instagram? Are your customers on Instagram? We're going to talk about that. It's not about you. It's about them. It's about your customers. It's not personal, it's business. So for the rest of the presentation, let's concentrate on social media for business, not personal. Let's keep the personal out of it. Although, frankly, I don't know how you do that sometimes. But for this presentation, let's just think about business, right? Senders, receivers on these platforms. Here's the secret, ladies and gentlemen, of social media for business. Listen, decide, and act. And by the way, when I say act, I mean not taking an action is in fact an action. Let me repeat that. Listen, decide, act. The whole purpose of social media and business, it's a listening tool. You use it to listen, to learn, and then to help you present and gain clients. I'm telling you right now, that's how you use social media for business, right? It's very different. And here's really the problem. Because there's so much social media and so much internet, if everybody thinks, and you know what I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen, if everyone thinks they're a kitchen bathroom designer or whatever, they think they're an architect or they think whatever, because of the internet, and that's, ladies and gentlemen, is what they think, how the heck are you going to expect them to react to you when you tell them, I'm a kitchen and bath designer, or I'm an architect, or I'm whatever, right? If everybody, because of the unbelievable amount of information out there, believes that they in fact know what you know, how do you differentiate? How do you convince them? I was at one of the presentations I was last year. There was a panel of 3 high-end designers on a panel being peppered. And one of the things they talked about is that people just don't believe them anymore. They just don't believe them anymore because they have access to so much information. That's where social media comes in. Social media is going to help you listen very carefully to your prospects, to your targets. I like to call it sneaky social media, but the sneaky's got that kind of connotation, denotation, right? But you use it for an example. And the example I'm going to use is going to be basically residential or commercial. I chose a commercial example, although you can use what I'm going to show you for residential, for your, if you're going after a person, but I didn't want to make it too privacy, but I chose a commercial. And what I chose is Edwards Hospital in Naperville. Most of the people in the audience work both commercial and residential. The example I'm going to go through you today, basically you can use this for either one. I chose commercial because it's a little safer, but I'd be happy to comment on how you use it for residential. The first thing you should notice is that most people have websites today. And on those websites, you see in the lower left-hand corner, they always put their social media links on there. Some work, most of them work, some don't. They change their social media from time to time. If you looked at that 2 years ago, you only had 4 social media channels. And since then, they've added Instagram. You see that? So it's always good as you're prospecting and learning to understand one thing. Nothing stays the same. And if you're going to go after a target, if you're going to go after a company and try to gain them as a client, if you're going to go after someone in a zip code because you believe that you can design their kitchens and baths, you have to understand the composition of those people. And the best way to do that is through social media. And you start with the commercial by looking at their website. Let's look at Facebook. Facebook has grown significantly, right? It was the first one. He did the right job. But look at what he's going through now. Everybody's dropping Facebook. Not everybody, but a lot of people are dropping them. They're fine. Even young kids are saying, it's passé, it's old school, right? And yet he continues to have a big audience, lots of eyeballs. He makes a lot of money selling advertising. What do you do when you get a Facebook ad on Facebook? See, I'm not a Facebook guy. I use it. I'm on it. I remember when it was first invented, my client came over and said, I left my press release on Facebook. I said, proudly, this is many years ago. I said, I'm on Facebook. He said, great, let's get on there. And I got on there on Facebook and he goes, Jim, you have no friends. I said, I don't want any friends. He says, why are you on Facebook? I said, because I like to watch. I like to listen. I like to learn. We found this press release, had a great meeting, and since we connected, but I don't think Facebook is there. But the business is. The business you're pursuing, the target you're pursuing, is probably on Facebook, especially if they have the Facebook icon. If you go on their, if you're on Facebook, you can't get onto Facebook without being on Facebook, so you got to be there. And you go to their Facebook page, ladies and gentlemen, everything you need to gain that piece of business is right there. They are posting things. And let me ask you a question. Do you think they're posting anything that they're ashamed of? They're only posting things they are proud of, things that they've accomplished. And I'm going to use this example throughout these media, and that's why I'm not going to really dwell on Facebook too much. But you can go on Facebook and you can see people who are liking this hospital. Maybe you know Lori Nichols. You can look at their Facebook connections and go, oh, I know that person. And suddenly you're social, talking to them. What do you know about Edwards Hospital, right? This is a post on the left, looking for the bright side. I made my dad laugh telling him he was put in the BO room in the ER. I hope he's fine. This is a sensitive post. You know, when Facebook first came out, I was astounded. I had a young man in my web developer who said, Jim, you better get onto these social media platforms. And I said, Brad, why would you tell anybody about the operation you have? He says, no, you got to get on this. You got to get on this. He met his wife on Facebook, I found out subsequently. And now he's living in the Philippines, a great young man. But he taught me that this is what these platforms are for. Imagine presenting to Edwards Hospital and noting that Andy Cash made a comment about the BO room as part of your presentation. It shows, one, that you watch them, you listen to them, and you're sensitive. That's what listening is about, ladies and gentlemen. It's showing your prospects and client that you care. Not just, here's my proposal, here's what I intend to do, and here's the cost. Make it human. That's what these social media platforms give you, is the humanness of people. This is my personal favorite channel, Twitter. I love Twitter. Twitter is going to change the world. It started out in '06. It's barely over 10 years old, right? And they're facing a lot of, oh my God, privacy and all that stuff. But they've grown and they continue to grow. And you cannot watch the news to any night, any night. They're not quoting Facebook posts, they're quoting Twitter posts. Why? Because Twitter is an instantaneous. You know, when they had that terrible tsunami in Japan many years ago, before the geographic guys knew it was going on, people knew it was going on across the world because they were tweeting about it. When the Boston Marathon bombers were, where they cornered the last guy, people were watching this through the Twitter guy who was on the third floor broadcasting. He went from like 10 followers to 50,000 and just instantly, because they were tuned in to live presentation. Twitter is changing the world. This company that you're after, Edwards Hospital, has a Twitter account. They post things on the Twitter account. The post on the right is from the Illinois Hospital Association, and because they're in Naperville, Illinois, of course, but there's a lead for you. You got to, if you're going after hospitals, ladies and gentlemen, you better join the associations. Now, here's the one that they retweeted that the Illinois Hospital did, where the congressman was meeting with one of the players, Dan Sullivan, from Edwards Hospital. And if you want to know who Daniel Sullivan is, you just go there and look for him on LinkedIn. If you look at their followers, and this is important in Twitter, you have people you follow and people who are following you, right? You can see them all. You can download by just clicking and clicking and clicking. You can download every follower of this hospital. And from there, you can find people who you want to follow and start dialogue. And you're going to say right now, Jim, geez, I just don't have the time to do all this. We're going to talk about that in the second part of this. Of course you don't. But you better find some time. YouTube video is revolutionizing. If you don't have video on your websites right now, ladies and gentlemen, get videos. And it doesn't have to be, Martin Scorsese Productions. This could be your own. There are so many YouTube videos now. You know this. How do I change a battery on my garage door opener? Google it, YouTube, done. You need YouTube videos that show your work, that show you in action, that whatever. Because this YouTube is changing the way people view content. It's no longer those three channels. Edwards Hospital has a YouTube channel. If you go to their YouTube channel and you start looking at videos, you basically see the president of Edwards Hospital giving a marvelous talk for a minute. She talks for a minute and 40 seconds about what is important to her in Edwards Hospital. And ladies and gentlemen, if you don't build in what she says, Debbie, when she started, she says, you don't have to take notes because we're recording this. That's great. You shouldn't. But ladies and gentlemen, this is a recording. And if you listen to this, you have to take notes. You know why? Because you can use the notes in your pitch. I saw the president of Edwards Hospital say this on YouTube. Do you know how impressive that is to your target? When you play back what they said, it shows you're interested in them. It shows you care enough to take the note, to deliver to them and it shows because she said this. Oh, by the way, when I design exactly what I do, you see how you start connecting these dots? Listen, decide, and act. That's really the secret. One of my personal favorites again, and the social media channel is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is marvelous, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? You can find anybody that's on LinkedIn, of course. You can't find people who are not in LinkedIn. And hint, hint, some of the executives you're after are not on LinkedIn. So it's not an end all. I hope you didn't get the impression that social media is going to solve all your new business problems. But you go to LinkedIn and you can find people that are on there. And guess what? Edwards Hospital is on LinkedIn as a company page. Most companies have company pages. and you want to link the company page. Your company, if you're going after them, you should link your company page to theirs. Start following them. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, follow them. You know, when I met my wife, I was, you know, I said, when are you going out with me? And I kept talking, you know, in those days, I would probably be said, well, Jim, you're stalking her. Well, no, I was just trying to go out with her. Following people is not stalking. Should I repeat that? Following people, following companies is not stalking. If they didn't want to be followed, ladies and gentlemen, they can shut you off. They could just turn you right off if they don't want to be followed. But that's why they're on these platforms. They want to engage. You know, being social, if you ever, I have another course on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Being social with other people is one of the driving forces of human nature. We're social animals. And so if you want to be followed, that's what you want to do. And LinkedIn is the place to do it. Go to Google and find the director of construction, because you're involved in design and right for Edwards Hospital, and it'll bring you right up. You go to LinkedIn, you find some stories, there she is, and you find out it's really Tim Lentz. He's the construction manager. There he is. You can connect to him, you can email him, you can do anything, but only if you're on LinkedIn, right? And not only that, he gives you, there's the guy. And if you go further, look at this. LinkedIn gives you everybody at the hospital that you might want to engage with. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say this in a very carefully, and I want to lower my voice. This is too easy. You know, in the old days, you'd have to go there, you'd have to knock on doors, you'd have to ask, you'd have to be on the phone. Today, it's LinkedIn. But that doesn't guarantee you automatic entry, does it? It doesn't. You still have to write a great letter. You still have to have a great phone acumen. You can't just do these things just because you're on the social platform and say, well, Jim, it's not working. They're not connecting back to me. You got to give them a reason to do that. And you do that not by doing LinkedIn connections and Twitters and tweets, right? You do that by having a great website. And I don't want to forget Google. Well, Jim, wait a minute. I've been told this in this webinar when I give it in the past. That's not a social media channel. And I laugh. Why are you laughing? Because it's the biggest social media channel in the world. Google controls the world, don't they? We don't want them to, but they do. So let's respect them and understand them for what they do. They deliver content on page one. You want to be on page one. That's another course. But Google does it. So if I do that on Google, guess what? It sends me back to their website. I can read about their projects right on their website. I can actually sign up to take the news, and I can look for news and download the news on their website. This is off of their website. It's giving me enormous information to prepare my proposal, so when I pitch them, I don't look like another designer. I don't look like another architect. I don't look like a commodity product. Ladies and gentlemen, social media brings you out of being a commodity into being a somebody. That's what social media does. I remember Pinterest when I was at the High Point Market, and this was about 7-8 years ago, and they said, I taught doing focus groups with interior designers, and they said, you know, what's the hottest social media channel? They went Pinterest. I go, what the heck is that? And I learned Pinterest is what they were using to collaborate with their clients. Pinterest has boards. Don't ask me why. Edwards Hospital is on Pinterest. They have boards. Of course, they're talking about healthy food and you know, but they have a board on Pinterest. And if you're onto Pinterest, at least you know you're on Pinterest, you see them and so on and so forth, right? It's all about health with a hospital. So Google, you can't do it enough. So I Googled Edwards Hospital and architecture, because let's say I'm an architect or I'm a designer and I want to go after them. I want to know, let's say, about architecture, and up comes healthcare design. And you know, these are organic searches. They're not paying for this because nobody wants to buy those words. Edwards Hospital brings up Meffy and Collin Associates. I don't know if they're in the audience, but that's the architecture firm that did Edwards Hospital renovation. This was their site 2 years ago. This is their site today. I feel like an eye doctor when I get to this. This is before, this is after. Okay, any difference? they become vulnerable because you can learn about them and you can pitch them. I'm going to stop now. I'm halfway through it. I think I'm doing good time. It's about 2:30. Debbie, do we have any questions?
Okay, Jim, I don't see any just yet, but if anyone does have questions, feel free to type them into the chat box and we'll read them back and Jim will try his best to answer. So
Great.
we'll wait for a moment and check and see if anyone has questions at this point. Oh, there's one. I'm not sure if you're seeing it, but it says, what is the best platform for sharing finished projects with customers and other designers?
Great question. For sharing projects with other designers, probably the platform is Instagram because designers love Instagram. Be careful of Houzz. Houzz is a great platform. I'm not saying you shouldn't be on the platform. I'm just saying if you go on that platform, consumers are on that platform. When consumers are on that platform, they look for the best designs. And I've talked to designers repeatedly on this. At the last KBIS show, half of the room raised their hand and they're anti-Houzz because they found out that consumers are taking their intellectual property, finding a builder and building the kitchen, and they were doing that. So sharing your designs with other designers should be, if I'm going to say this, start your own community of designers and share it by email. The minute you put it on a social media platform, I don't know the name of the person who asked that, but that's a great question. The minute you put it on the internet, this includes your website, so be careful what you put on your website. The minute you put it on a social media platform, it's available to the world. I know we're a global economy, but ladies and gentlemen, the people in this audience, just as I do, we're dealing with intellectual property. And intellectual property means that's your creativity that you're showing people. And you're going to say, well, how do I show my creativity without showing pictures or my designs? You have to do that. Of course you do. But don't give away the store. Don't tell them exactly how you did it. Don't, you got to entice, right? You got to display a certain amount of things. We give away tons of information. This seminar here, I'm giving you tons of information that were accumulated over the last 5 to 10 years, right? I don't mind sharing it with you because it's going to help your business. I'm in the business of helping businesses grow. That's what we do here, right? So sharing a little point here or point there. So the answer to your question is I would do it with Instagram for designer to designer talk. Pinterest is good too, but those are consumer. And I'm not saying Instagram is not a consumer platform. I'm just saying that Instagram is more designy for designers. They love that platform. Am I right?
It sounds like it. Someone was actually asking that question, but I think you answered it. They wanted to know your opinion, and I think you just gave it. And then there were some other questions in here, Jim, too, about your opinion on Houzz. So I think you answered that one as well.
Yes.
There was someone asking, her name is Lisa, what is
Yes.
the best platform to become an industry expert? She's suggesting, is it YouTube?
Um, Lisa, it depends which industry. There's many industry experts. So the platform of choice for industry experts, if you're really asking that, in all honesty, is your website. The reason I say that is because when you're on those platforms, those platforms are great to communicate, send, receive. But you really want all the eyeballs and all the people coming back to your website. So I would suggest to become an industry expert, you start a blog on your website and start posting white papers or opinions. And then if you want to do spin-off videos about that, taking, an idea you've written about or shown and then do a video about it, put it on YouTube, but link it always back to your website. You can embed it on your website. There's different techniques to do that. What you want to do, here's the rule. I remember when Brad, before he went to the Philippines, he used to come in, and one of the things he said, Jim, this is the best piece of advice you gave me. And web developers, they're really hotshot web developers, and they come in with all these, and they're very creative. I work with a bunch of really unbelievable people, but I'm an English teacher. I got into business because I was fired 3 times, and my rule that I gave Brad that I'll share with you is I like to bend the software to my will. I don't want to bend to the software's will. So for example, Google we're bending to Google's will when we create websites, trying to get on page one, trying to do this. We're trying to fool Google into bringing us up through their indexing. That's really trying to bend it to your will. You're trying to make it work for you, not to just spend that. So my advice to you to become an industry expert is to always focus on your website first and then use these social media channels to disseminate some of that expertise to your audiences via those channels, but always bring them back to your website. Bring them back to your website. That's where you want your form should be there for more information, a free demonstration, a free consulting, whatever. Does that answer, Lisa?
I think that's great, Jim. There's another question from Michelle. She's wondering, how do you get around, I'm assuming that she means putting out your information out there when clients expect to see your portfolio?
Okay. So there's a number of ways to do that. And your portfolio should be out there, but what you could do, again, on your website, right? You can create private rooms. It depends on who's running your website, but you can create password protected rooms where you can privately show your pitch to a client. That one of the things that just remember, you're going to have a gallery and a portfolio. We show our case histories. We're always nervous about who sees it, our techniques, but then you get over your nervousness and realize that every job is a custom job anyway. But if you want to have a private showing to someone, there's ways to do this. For example, platforms like GoToMeetings, you can create a GoToMeetings where it's just you and your client, and you pitch them right there, create a PDF file of your pitch, and then send it to them afterwards where no one but they see that. That's what, the best way to do that, I believe, is to create, just be careful what you're putting out there. Because the minute you do that, like this, Debbie's recording this is going to be out there now. Everybody's going to hear what I'm talking about. Right? Did I answer the question?
I think so.
Okay.
Then there's a quick question here about if a designer runs a kitchen design studio, how can he or she use Facebook for getting more clients? What's the best strategy for that type of situation?
A design. You said, could you just repeat the first part? What kind of business are they?
Okay, if a designer runs a kitchen design studio,
Yes.
how can he or she use Facebook for getting more clients, and what can be the strategy in that case?
Oh, that'll cost you. No, I'm kidding. What you create an event in your showroom, in your design studio, or whatever we're talking about, and then you use the social media channels like Facebook and Twitter to drive the audiences into there. Remember, social media channels reach zillions of people, so and you need to grow those to be your followers. That's what you want. You want a community, right? But they're not the end all. They're just a way of disseminating information. You should never use one social media channel to the exclusion of another. You can't
And
use
that,
all of them, but you have
Jim,
to
that
use. I'm sorry.
no, I'm sorry, but that leads into another question, actually.
Sure.
There's a gentleman named Michael. He's asking about, do you recommend people using Hootsuite to manage all the social media platforms, or something else to post to them all at the same time?
Michael, collect your $10 after this by emailing me. That's the perfect question. You know why? Because Hootsuite is a great tool. It's one of the great tools of managing platforms. We use it. It's a collaboration tool for our clients. It's just one of many, but it's the one that's been around a long time. It's very easy to use. And you are right, Michael. Michael just gave everyone in the audience a terrific suggestion because you really can't manage these in one. You got to log in, log out. Hootsuite allows you to do all that. Although they stopped you can't use Facebook anymore. And they change it too. Hootsuite changes like all social media platforms. But yes, Michael, Hootsuite will help you manage these things. So when you're posting on Twitter, you can post on other platforms simultaneously. Yes, sir. Great answer.
Good. And someone else suggested it. Alyssa, she said they use Buffer. And Michael thanked you. He said, we use it when we post. By the way, it lets you use 3 free social media accounts before you have to pay.
And we love free, don't we? No.
And then just one final question, and then I
Sure.
guess we'll jump
And
back
then
in.
I'll go to the
So,
second half. Yep.
okay, right. And so Gwen is asking, how do we use social media for SEO, and what's the best way or platform for that?
Who asked that? What was her name?
Her name is Gwen.
Gwen. Great question. Social media is really not entirely SEO for SEO, because for SEO you're talking about Google searches. Google controls 70% of the searches in the in the world actually. There's Bing and Yahoo and all these others, but you're talking Google. You want to be on page one in Google, and they're just starting to classify and index social media platforms. And the reason I say that is because there's so much information. The best way to do SEO, here's a freebie, ready? Is content on your own website. Everyone in this audience, if you take one thing away besides listen, decide, act, a blog on your website is the single most important thing to do SEO in the world. I'm telling you right now. When you're done, I want you to Google Conversation from Hell. Conversation from Hell. Just Google it. I don't care where you are in the United States, I'm going to be number one. And the only reason I'm number one, and by the way, there are no ads on there. The reason there's no ads on there, because only the devil would buy ads on Conversation from Hell, right? And he doesn't need ads, right? So I wrote a blog 2 or 3 years ago called Conversation from Hell. And Google, over the years, within a few months, I'm number one. You can also Google aging in place marketing, which is more attuned to the audience in front of me. And we own those words because we blogged about it 2 years ago. SEO takes longer than running a Google ad, but Google will find you because here's another secret, ladies and gentlemen. Google reads everything, but they can't read everything because there's too much to read. So they start with websites. Then they go to social media. That's what you do for SEO. I hope that answered your question, Gwen.
Okay, are you ready to move on?
I am.
Thank you, Jim.
That's great. I'm glad we had this little break. All right. Whew. I'm excited. I'm standing up. I'm jumping around. Social media guidelines. Here's some guidelines for everyone in the audience. Start with a plan. You can't, I'm just saying, well, I was at a presentation once. One of the attendees was going, Jim, this is a live presentation. I just don't have the time. And someone next to her said, well, you better do it while you're having your morning coffee because you got to find the time. Start with a plan. Outline your objectives. Figure out which platforms you want to try. If you're not on some of them, it sounds like Michael's on many of them because he's using Hootsuite already. There's always help. The question, ladies and gentlemen, is always about time. You just don't have enough of it. No one does. So it's like TikTok. Make every second count. What the heck does that mean? What does that mean? Of course I want to make every second count. That's why you have to think these things through. So don't be afraid to look at what other people are doing. How can I repurpose what they're doing and make it work for my company? Designers and architects are great sharers of information. They don't look at each other as a competitor, but in fact, they are competitors. And what you really want to do when you're talking to people is understand where they're coming from. Remember, it's not about you, it's about them. Where are they coming from? What works for them? And I told you at the beginning of this presentation, there is no magic bullet. There is no one platform, and I think Michael would agree, and everyone, Gwen, there is no one platform that's going to say this is the only platform. When Houzz first started, speaking of Houzz, they were, oh my God, they grew by leaps and bounds. And then they realized something. And you know who started it is a couple in California because they couldn't find any ideas for their home, right? So they stumbled on this idea of Houzz, and they created Houzz. And became a mammoth of images. It's the largest image library, I think, in the United States, if not the world. And it's always on page one. Why? Because they tag all their photos. Google can't see photos. You know that. You have to write a tag about them. Yeah, that's how you get your SEO. You can't just post a photo. You have to run a caption or whatever. So Houzz became so big that one day the owners looked at each other. I don't know this for a fact, but I'm generalizing. And they said, guess what? We're not making any money. So you know what they're doing now, right? They've become a huge distributor. You can buy products on Houzz now, right? Because it's all about the money. You got to follow the money, right? Yes, I saw that. Houzz is overwhelming. It is. it's not only overwhelming, they're going to designers now say, give me some money and I'll make sure you're on the top search, because they're trying to amortize it. I'm going to tell you right now, in 2 to 3 years, it's just, somebody's going to buy it or something else and try to fund it. These social media channels don't make money. You know this. You'd think they make money, but they're not really driving it out of the box here. You know that. So start with a plan. Ask yourself what you should do. Look at other people. Go Google other websites. But I'm telling you right now, your plan must include content generation, which means a blog. Target your desired audience. Well, Jim, I want to reach everybody. Well, that's not only impossible, it's like in social media, it's like a sine wave. You're popular and then you die. You're popular and then you die, right? It's just spurts. And I still think they do that. They talk about when they develop websites. Well, Jim, we want stickiness. Well, no, you don't. You don't want to have people sticking to your site. You want them to find you, examine you, and make a judgment about you and hire you. If you want a sticky site, you have to be a news broadcaster, right? You want to broadcast news, but you don't want that. You really want to think about your audience. Is it high end, middle, low end? What's your target? Hospitals, schools, whatever. And shape your content to that audience. Shape the content to the audience. If it's educators, if it's schools, by heaven, use those words in your blog. If it's aging in place, I'm a CAP certified designer, right? There I am. You got to use those words in your blog. Someone wanted to be a social, an industry expert, a platform leader. Keep using the words of the leadership position you want to be in, and people will find you. People will find you. Question popped up: how do you shape that content to your audience? Know your audience. Talk to your audience. Don't get me started. I'm going to lose that track. Bring that question up later. Here's the hardest one, ladies and gentlemen. Devote the proper time and resources. You have to commit. You have to make the commitment. Well, Jim, I can't. I'm too busy designing. Yes, you are. But and I'm not saying you got to do this. You can hire an intern to help you. But just be careful who you hire and what you're giving them instructions to do. If you don't, for example, our clients use us. Many manufacturers, all the brand names, all the brand people that you specify in your specifications have social media managers who are content generators, who are doing that full time. There are big businesses in this audience and there are small. No one has the time to do it all. However, you remember what Alexander Pope said: a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. You know why it's dangerous? Because if you have a little knowledge, you can't be fooled. You can think you have all the knowledge when it's little, and then you will be fooled because there's no such thing. But you got to know enough about these things. You have to know enough about these platforms so you don't get buffaloed, so you don't get fooled into thinking, well, it's just Facebook. That's all I got to be on, right? No. So time and resources. And, like I said, I'm so grateful for the hour you're giving me, but I wish I could have 3 hours, but Debbie wouldn't give it to me. I'm kidding. Build relationships. That's what this is about. I can't, when I started on this and I embraced Twitter, my strategy was simple. I want to have more followers than I follow, and I want to become an industry leader. So I want to just talk about business and trends in advertising and marketing. And it's true today. Well, how many followers do you have, Jim? I don't have any more than probably around 700. Well, that's not a lot. No, it's not. But you know what? They're all quality. They're not only my clients, they're the American, marketing. So they're people of stature. That's what I wanted. I don't need thousands and thousands and thousands, nor do you. So it's about building relationships. Don't just look, and you know what's going on with robots and bots and all this social media stuff. I can send you a 37-page white paper written by a military guy about how Russian influence, through social media. It's a great paper. It's posted on one of our websites. But what you want to do is build relationships with real people who are going to help you gain business, right? Or get business. Don Tickle, one of my great mentors that I met 10 years ago at the High Point Market. Great guy. I met him when he was 75. I couldn't keep up with the guy. He said, Jim, you never learn anything by talking. That's why, ladies and gentlemen, social media is about listening. Listening. I know you want to talk. I wish I could just listen to all of you instead of talking, but this is what this webinar is about, right? So you can only control your reaction. Listen, decide, act. You can't do anything else. You cannot. So always be listening and take the emotion out of it. I'm emotional now because I love this topic. I'm jumping up and down, right? Respond in a way that will benefit your business. Do not get into a Twitter war. Do not get into anything else. I'll give you an example. Always take a deep breath before you respond. You see the picture in the lower right there? Some goofball at the Telegraph tweeted that teapot that JCPenney started selling looked like Hitler. Now, okay, I get it, right? It's got a little mustache, right? But he tweeted this. This is what I'm talking about. Be careful what you put out there because it starts a firestorm. This was done in 2013. I took this for a specific reason because it still goes on today. Look what happened with that character that's not going to do the Oscars, right? He's not going back because he's apologized 5 times and he still can't get over what he was tweeting about. Who cares? They tweeted this out there, right? And all of a sudden it became a crisis. Oh my God, my teapot looks like Hitler. So what does JCPenney do? What would you do if you got a tweet like this? This is what JCPenney did. They took the time. Crisis management means addressing the crisis head on. That's a whole nother course. JCPenney responded by putting 5 people on social media and started responding to everyone who either tweeted it, retweeted it, reposted it, or anything else. They just said, oh, it was unintentional. How many companies do you know that if this were to happen would have pulled that teapot from the shelf? You know what's going on nowadays. JCPenney didn't do that. Now we can argue about JCPenney's lifeblood or, their length of time, but I'm just saying, right? They sold, they sold, everybody wanted the Hitler teapot, right? Now I'm making fun of that, but it shows that you want to be sensitive to the power of the social media channels. I've often seen things, I'm sure you have too, on social media. If you're on these channels, you say, oh, I've got to respond to this. Don't do it. Don't do it. Unless it helps your business. I had a client, we resigned him 3 years ago. This was a 20-year client, and he something was posted on social media. He wanted to respond to it. I said, don't do it. First of all, you're not correct. What do you mean I'm not correct? I'm the client. I'm always correct. No, you're not correct. He did it. It started a firefight, and he ended up, he just lost because he was wrong. You can't win anything in a firefight like that, right? And it's easy to pick a fight on Twitter, right? Or any social media channel. Don't do it. Understand how powerful these things have become. These are not just here today, gone tomorrow. I remember when Macintosh was invented, I told my boss at the time, who was considering purchasing $26,000 word processing machines. I said, Frank, this is the future. He goes, it's a toy. I go, no, it's not a toy. It's the future. This was in the 80s when they first were invented, right? And he bought those word processing machine and eventually went down. People respond, they spend lots of time on these channels. It becomes addictive, so just be careful. There's a whole cult going on now to turn your phones off. Life is short, ladies and gentlemen. That's why you want to use this with discretion. You need it for business. There's no question about it. But don't get hooked on it because it's not the end all. Your website is. Example, I like to respond to things all the time. This was a few years ago. I wrote the editor And it started a little Twitter war, but I never engaged this guy. He was probably a postal carrier that retired, and he just wanted to start a fight. The good news is I just don't engage. And eventually I just said, when I did engage, I said, thanks for your opinion, good luck. You don't get into a war like that. So if you're on the channels, start using them. Don't be afraid of failing. Don't, we all make mistakes. The good news is, even if you take it back sometimes, it still lives on the internet. So just be careful what you put out there. Challenge yourself. Become a blogger. Tie your website into your channels. Pick one or two and go after it. And finally, I put a little column together to add to my presentation because I think I have a few minutes left on the right. Communicate their role, but look at the last one on the bottom. If everyone thinks they're a designer or whatever, how do you differentiate? You differentiate, right, by showing people your value. And what is your value? Your value, ladies and gentlemen, is what you do differently. The passion, you all have passion. Show the passion. Show the passion in your design, in the way your website works, in the interchange you have with people. And that's really how to do that. Deb, I'm ready for a few more questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jim. This has been so much fun, and really, really informative. So going back to a couple of questions that have been coming in as you've been speaking. So Aleem was asking, and I think this is a great question, how do you calculate ROI for all your social media efforts?
Aline asked that?
Aleem asked that, yes.
Okay, so, that's the greatest question in the world. I'm an RO guy. In direct mail, when I used to mail 100 out to get 10 back, that's 10%. How do I improve? Social media is very, very different. It's what I call soft ROI. Most of the time, you can't get a hard number. For example, if you do a post, there are ways, and Michael will probably be able to tell you, like in Hootsuite or on all these other channels. Every channel I've been talking about has an analytics button. Find the analytics button and look at that. When I post, I actually shorten my links, and I can tell you, how many people click that link. That's part of ROI. If you're talking about how much business do you accumulate from this, I can tell you right now, that's a harder number because it's not a direct correlation. Because first of all, you're in a business-to-business world. In the design and architecture and showroom business, there is no one action that produces a sale, is there? There are sales being produced, but the culmination that leads to that sale are a series of steps that happen one after the other after the other. Now, take away a step. For example, if I don't research my prospects on LinkedIn, I am less likely to get that account if I didn't spend the time researching before I make a pitch. I'm telling you right now. How do I factor in that? You should start keeping timesheets. We keep timesheets. We're like lawyers. We're not lawyers, but we keep timesheets. How much time do you expend? That's part of the ROI answer.
Good answer. Thank you, Jim. I know that's probably a whole topic unto itself.
It is.
So Jen Nigis was asking, let me go back to her question here. It's kind of lengthy. So she's saying, if you are satisfied with one's business and closing rate, lead generation, does one still need to participate in social media? Then she goes on to say, I get 50% of my business from house and 50% from referrals. I mainly post on Facebook and participate in design competitions. I am satisfied, but as an overachiever, should I feel guilty that I'm not doing more?
No, if you're satisfied with what you're doing, then there's no need. But if you're an overachiever and you want to challenge yourself, but just be careful. If you've got the proven formula and it's working for you, and you change that formula, you might lose some business. So if you're satisfied, and I don't know, I really got to talk to you after this webinar because I don't know anybody who's satisfied. Although I've met business people, in my career where they're pretty. I don't need to advertise. Well, that's great. Well, the rest of us have to do something. So I would say if you're satisfied, keep the formula going. If you got half from house and half from referrals, just increase your house and referrals to increase your business.
Good, thank you.
Mhm.
The Wesley would like to know, he's saying, should I configure my social media for others to follow me? I have a lot of debates on social media using my personal account. Can this hurt my business account?
Excellent question, Wesley. Personally, I try to keep personal separate from business. So that's why, for example, on my social media, I have a personal sometimes, but mostly I'm just about business. I keep it very, very separately. It can, in fact, hurt. It can, in fact, because people are personal people. You know, they might see your opinion as a person, and they might mistakenly transfer that. Oh, he must think about that in business too. You know, it's hard to say. I would keep them separate if you can, simply because business is business and personal is personal. And you're going to say, well, Jim, how do I take the personal out of business? Well, you really can't, but the accounts you can. The accounts should be separate, in my opinion.
Okay, good. Thank you. And then I've got two questions here that kind of fit together. So Marilyn and Michelle. Marilyn's asking, how do you start a blog? And then Michelle wants to know, do you have any suggested resources for learning how to blog well?
Ooh. First question is you start a blog by having your website create a section called the blog, and you just start. I don't know. A lot of websites are built in WordPress or Drupal or some convenient way where you can do your own editing. That's the first thing. If you got a website where you're not editing yourself, then you really should change the website so you can in fact get in there and just put a blog up there and start writing about it. Now, how do you write effective blogs? Through practice. And the way you do that is you go on and say, how do I go to Google and say, I'm not being facetious, but go to Google and say, how do I write effective blogs? And you'll get some ideas. But the best way to do this, I'm telling you right now, and it leads me to this is tweeting for success, is to really go online and look for things you like to read that really make an impression on you, and then start looking at that style. What about that style impressed you? Why do you like that? What, or find contrary wise, find out things you don't like and you never want to write like that. And then it's just practice. Seriously, ladies and gentlemen, it's practice, practice. It's the same way with your design. You know, you're all designers, architects, showroom people. You didn't become successful overnight. You practiced every day. You change things. It's the same thing with writing. You know, this is what I do for a living, right? So to me, it's second nature. But I understand, you know, and write, you know, one of the secrets of writing is rewriting. You write it and then you edit it. Because unless we're Mozart, it doesn't come out perfect the first time. I'd be happy
Okay.
to talk about this afterwards as well.
Okay, Jim, I got just a few more in here and then we'll
Sure.
we'll wrap it up. And I'm not too clear on this question, but it looks like someone's asking, do you not only need followers, but do you also need critics?
Um, the critics will come by their own. No, I don't think you need critics. I think what you really need are just followers. And I wouldn't go out and say, I'm creating this to get followers. What I would do is I would create whatever you're creating in terms of content on these social media, because the social media channels are about content, right? That's what we're talking about. What you want to do is create content that's you. You want to make it yours. You don't want to make it anyone else's. It's got to be about you. Because, ladies and gentlemen, you know, take away all this stuff we've been talking about. People want to do business with people they like. So they got to like you. And this goes back to the personal question, but they got to like what they see on your business. You know, one of the greatest compliments we've ever gotten, we were pitching this major account. He came into the office. This was for a $40,000 piece of research. And we're talking to him for an hour. And I asked him, you know, Mike, is there anything more that you need from us to help you make this decision? Because you always want to try to close the piece of business, right? And he said, you know, no, Jim, really, everything I needed to know is on your website. In fact, I didn't, this is a direct quote, I didn't know companies like yours existed until I found your website. Now, I was delighted because we had just revised our website, right? That's why what I'm talking about is just to be you. You can't please everybody. It's impossible. So you start by knowing your strengths and weaknesses and presenting yourself through your work to people around you. And people will find you. You're always going to get critics. Wow, look at this. I would have done it this way. Stay away from that stuff. You know, you don't need that. What you need are the people that say, "Oh, look at this. This is exactly what I want." Those are the people you want, and they will find you. Believe me. It just takes time. It's not an overnight thing. It's a time thing. If you're in a relationship, you don't just have a relationship. It takes time to cultivate the relationship, doesn't it?
I think it does. I agree. So I just wanted to say, Michael also left a remark here about, he said to start a website, you can use Wix. It's free, and they also have information about creating a blog there as well. Thank you, Michael. And then someone is asking about how often should a business update their website?
Oh, caution about free, Michael. Wix is great. You're right. But you really, if you're doing websites, you really want, just like I wouldn't do interior design or kitchen and bath design, you really want an expert to help you do that too, besides yourself. I know you're all experts. But anyway, you see, that goes back to what I was saying before. What was the question? The last question is
The
how
last
often should you
question,
update it?
correct. How often should you update your website?
If you're doing a blog, the answer is daily or weekly. You should be posting constantly on your blog, and by definition, you're updating your website every week. If you're doing a blog, should you change the look of your website is a different story entirely. And that's where planning comes in. That step that I told you about planning, because you know yourself as designers, you do all your upfront work during the design, the planning stage. That's where all this blood, sweat, and tears happens, right? Guess what? That's what happens in a website. Upfront blood, sweat, and tears. Don't just do it to do it. There's nothing free in life. There's nothing easy. You got to think it through. But once you do that and start building it, that's really why when you build it, you probably don't have to update it for years, several years. It depends. You know, trends change. If you look at the templates being produced today and you go back 5 years, they don't look anything like they did 5 years. And 5 years from now, they're going to look differently too. People like boxes nowadays on their website. They like little quick reads, things like that. Just remember, Google reads everything. So the answer is plan it well, design it well, and then let it cook for a while. But do that blog and you'll be updating it daily.
Okay, great. And that kind of answers the same question, I think, Jim, from Katie here, who's wanting to know how often you should post on social media. Again, I think that's up to the individual.
And Michael, who had
But
Hootsuite, will tell you I personally I schedule my tweets on the weekend and I'm tweeting all week. And that's really good for you because you want to be on there, because one of the things about social media is, ladies and gentlemen, you don't know when people are on those channels. You just don't know. So you got to be there often. And don't think for a minute that if you post once about one thing that everybody saw it. Think of ways to amortize that post into maybe two or three or four different ones, because people are not on those channels all the time. They're just not. There's no time. But you want to be there when they're there. And don't just be hooked on social media. Go outside social media and send emails to people. Start messaging people in those channels. I messaged once to a guy in Britain that wrote an article in Ad Age, one of my media outlet books that I read. And it was a Sunday morning. I read his article. I figured out his email. There's ways to do that. And I sent him an email, and and he answered me. He says, "What is the," and the British talk differently, right? "What a delightful way to wake up for in the morning and see your email." And we ended up following each other, right? And he's a player. Got a big agency in the UK, a major guy. Don't let the social media just be where you do it. And remember, it's about the connections and the relationships that you're after. That's how you build business. And for the one that had half house, half referrals, that's great. But if you are an overachiever, challenge yourself. What are you satisfied with 50-50, or should you get is there a way to increase your business through these things? I don't know.
well, I hate to say that we need to wrap it up because I'm sure we could continue to go on and on here. Jim, you've been fantastic, and a lot of people have been thanking you. I'm not sure that you can see it, for all the great information. They've learned so much, and I have too. And I want to thank you, Jim, personally, for being with us today and
Could I
for everyone
could
out
I
there in the
mention one
audience
thing?
for hanging with us.
Yeah. Could I just say one more thing?
Of course you may.
I'd like to thank the audience personally so much for your hour, a little over an hour now, and I thank you so much for your attention. I really enjoyed presenting to you, and if you do get the KBIS, please look me up, follow me on Twitter, and do whatever Debbie tells you to evaluate. Thank you so much, Debbie. Thank you.
You're welcome. And everybody, I hope you have a great day, and be sure to look for my email and we'll be in touch. And there's some information here online, right here about Jim and how to connect with him. So feel free to do that. I will also send that information in an email. Have a wonderful day. Thanks again, Jim. Thanks again to all of you. Come back next week for our next one. Bye.